I only write tracks for Steve Swift reviews. He punched me twice in the face and asked for a duel. The pugilistic prophet with newbies diagnostics, like Scroobius Pip but less toxic. The UK comet shooting stars never lost it. It's 2025 and the internet still dies. Guys are chasing algorithms like a crack pipe high.
You know, anytime you hear the music can only mean one thing. It can mean that it's time for the bees of boxing, and that means that we get to get the knowledge of the man who knows more about boxing than boxing knows about itself. I'm talking about the pugilistic prophet himself from across the pond. I know all of those P's should have this microphone just popping hard, but I don't know what happened there. Listen, Steve, how you doing today, brother?
I thought you were just about to introduce Bob Arum. Well, thank you.
We could only be so lucky.
I'm very well. It's a Sunday evening here, and I've calmed down after going shopping.
Oh, well, listen, shopping in itself requires that you be around people instead of sitting around watching boxing. But the problem is, Steve, is that we did have boxing this past weekend. Even heavyweights came out to play ish this weekend. Tell me what you thought of Ajit Kabayel and his performance, first of all, this weekend.
Ajit Kabayel wants to be the new and fresh monster in the heavyweight world. And looking at that performance, he certainly isn't fresh, and he certainly isn't a monster. Now, he got that done, but when he's saying, I want Usyk, I'm thinking, no, you're going to have to grow some skills first.
Well, I mean, he did knock out Zheli Zhang.
He did a sickening body punch, but then Damian Kneiber, who is not ballyhooed in any way, shape, or form, most people would be saying, "Oh, the Polish hussar himself, hussar." He came to fight and was able to lay quite a few gloves, left and right, on Mr. Kabayel early on in this fight. It only went 3 rounds, but that was expected. Mr.
Sure.
Kabayel, though, shipped some punishment.
So, I mean, I can understand that. And let me just throw this out there as well, because you also got to remember the guy, Damian Kneiber, 6'7", with a 6-inch reach advantage. This kind of looked like what you would see when you see anybody fighting Tyson Fury, but without the skill set of Tyson Fury. This is what I saw. You know what I mean? Like, listen, Kneiber did a really good job of sticking behind his jab early on, and it took Kabayel quite a bit of time, I think, to just try to kind of figure it out. I think come the middle of the second round, he was like, I'm not going to figure this out, so I'm just going to go in guns a-blazing and try to hit this guy with something. And he was landing these body shots. Those body shots that he was landing were absolutely it made me have to go to the washroom afterwards. And I was just watching it on TV. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand that, but I also understand what you're saying, because Kneiber had no business being in there at this level, I don't think. Right. So what do you do with Kabayel now?
Well, the thing is that you're right. And my concern is that, yes, if you are fighting someone who's taller and has a bigger reach, you've got to get better movement and angles. And Kabayel didn't show that. He came forward. You know, he did a Canelo Alvarez. He just lumbered forward and was there to be hit. I suspect what you do with Ajit Kabayel, and I know that people like Spencer Brown won't be very happy with this, you know, because he's bigging up Ajit Kabayel. I think what you do is you get him in with either Usyk or you get him in with Wardley, and you get him out of there quick. And he's like a dose of salts. He was a contender, and now he isn't. And that's what I think will happen with that.
Interesting. Well, he's setting himself up to get into that position. There's no doubt about it. He's there to be hit. They need heavyweights. And you might as well throw him into the Wolves now, because he's not getting any younger. Or
I agree.
or does he end up just kind of building his stock enough to where he could be one of maybe, I don't know, the only heavyweights, because nothing has been announced yet, Steve, for Zuffa Boxing. And this is really what I wanted to get into this week with Zuffa Boxing, because we are a week away, so to speak. Well, 2 weeks away, right? 2 weeks away, and only one fight, with the possibility of two, have even been announced for this Zuffa Boxing card on January 23rd. And as of recording this, it is now January 11th. What do you know about this, if anything?
I know that I did this when I saw the announcement. I was, what? It's the announcement I have seen, and you might have some more information here. The announcement I have seen is Callum Walsh versus Ocampo. And I'm thinking, well, that would be I mean, it's an interesting fight, but it's not a fight that you say, hey, we need to make this a success. Let's have these two fighting. You know, I mean, you sat down and you quite rightly a few weeks ago said they're going to get the big guns coming out and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to get the big guns coming out. For instance, if Canelo came out, if Floyd Mayweather came out and said, hey, I like this thing, you know, if Terence Crawford came out, and then you got your main event, and it was those two, and it was Walsh and Ocampo, you'd be thinking, hey, is that what we're looking for? Now, I know that Tony Khan said, and Dana White said, some fighters you know, some fighters you won't know, we're going to make our own stars. But this first episode has got to, that's what I'm calling it, an episode, has got to have some kind of success, a big bang. And that's not the bang, it's more like a wet fart.
It's, you know, I understand what you're saying. And I'm going to take this on a different approach, just for the people out there that are going, well, Steve, you're psychotic and crazy. And it can be two things. It can be multiple things at the same time. Listen, people, I don't see that Steve is wrong in this. I don't see that anything that we've said has been wrong in any of this. But did anybody know any fighters whatsoever when the Ultimate Fighter started, when the UFC started on TV? Did anybody know who they were? No. I mean, I don't think anybody did, really, right? Nobody knew who a Forrest Griffin was. Nobody knew who a Stephan Bonner was, but those two names put the UFC on the map and allowed it to grow into what it is now. We've kind of seen that Dana has put all of his eggs into this Callum Walsh basket. You know, my fear is that if we remember correctly, and I just want to point this out, the last time that Dana put all of his eggs into an Irish basket, turned out very well financially for the UFC, but for that person and the media, not so much. So I really hope that Callum Walsh cannot be like his MMA brethren from Ireland over there that has also made some money through Zuffa. This is what we know about Callum Walsh. He is a very young, very good fighter. This is probably going to be his biggest test. Because Carlos Ocampo is 38-3. So how do you think that that Zuffa would be promoting this guy? That out of those 38 fights, 41 fights, 3 of those losses have been against Tim Tszyu, Sebastian Fundora, and Errol Spence Jr., who they could say arguably at their time were some of the best fighters ever, right?
No, you're right. It's set up beautifully, and you're right to say this. It's set up beautifully for the boxing of boxing, because this could be a really, really interesting fight. And you can say, okay, Ocampo's there to be hit. Can Callum do that? And that's a really good way to sell a boxing match, and I think it will be a good match. And I take your point about who knew about the UFC and stars in the UFC before Ultimate Fighter, but this has got more at stake. Not financially for the UFC or for Zuffa, because as we keep being told, it's only 10 million, folks. That's all our liability is, 10 million. But there is more at stake, or am I just so subsumed and consumed with the business of boxing that I can't get out of my bubble? Because I'm thinking, this has got to be. They talk big now. They talk bigger than ever, and they're quite right to do so because they are big. So everything they do now has to be big, doesn't it?
You would think so, but at the same time, I think that like the UFC still does shows, like very, decent shows inside of the Apex Center. So if we break this down, everybody thought that Zuffa Boxing was going to have some event. They were talking already about doing it, inside of the same arenas that they do the pay-per-views, Allegiant or whatever they're doing them in down there. I keep wanting to say Thomas and Matt because I'm old as shit when I lived in Las Vegas, and that's what it was. But they were talking about this, and you looked at it, and it gave it this great big grandiose thing, like holy shit, they could have these big fights, and they could have these people coming out, and you could have these things that we talked about where you're like, hey, we've got this person, and hey, you're going to see this fight. But as we've gotten closer, none of that stuff came out. None of these types of announcements came out. Ticket sales didn't even come out. So now we're 2 weeks out from this thing, and they finally say, hey, yeah, we're still doing that. Don't think we forgot about it or anything, but it looks like the where we wanted to do it was booked already with a bar mitzvah. So we're just going to do it in our own backyard, but it's pretty cool. We also do UFC fights there. They also do UFC jiu-jitsu. Those shows are done out of the Apex Center as well. So I understand what they're doing here, but if you're going to follow up with what they did, because their first event, the first event that Zuffa Boxing got behind was what? It was Canelo Crawford. And now we're following that up with, no offense to Callum Walsh, but we're following that up with Callum Walsh in front of nobody like it was COVID.
Yeah. Are they? Because this is what's happening, I think, with Tyson Fury's comeback. Are they just measuring our expectations here, pouring a little bit of cold water on it and saying, I know we said it was going to be huge, but now we might be saying it's not huge because for the reasons you say, well, we're not quite there yet. And actually, we have announced a date and we're not quite there yet. A bit like Tyson Fury, we've announced a date, and we've announced it's happening, and we've announced that we wanted AJ, and now we can't. So today, or yesterday, Big John Fury has said, let's have a look and see how his training goes. So that's pouring cold water on all of that. Are they doing that? Are they saying, don't expect too much, folks? Because then if that fight is really good, we can say, that's what we expect, battling boxing. And maybe they're trying to say this is about battling boxing, which fits into a league.
Well, that's what this is a league. That's exactly what this is. And I think that's the reason that we haven't seen so much about this going forward. Here's the fear that I have with this main event, though, Steve, before we get into some of the business of boxing end of this, that I have a theory. I have a wild take on this. But the boxing of boxing on this, I think, goes exactly like they think it is. I think this is all set up. This has nothing to do with Carlos Ocampo. He's a one and done, son, inside of this thing, because you look at those 3 losses that he had, big names, huge names. Sebastian Fundora is a riddle that a lot of people cannot figure out right now. Tim Tszyu was one of those guys who tried to figure it out, and we saw what happened, with his forehead. But Fundora, he lost to a unanimous decision. But to Tim Tszyu and Errol Spence Jr., he got knocked out in the first round. And I think this is what they're hoping will happen with Callum Walsh so that they can get Callum Walsh over. Huge. Now, That said, let's talk about the business end of this a little bit. And do you think that one of the reasons that they've held back and that they don't have this stuff is because maybe it's possible that there is a lot more backlash happening with these governing bodies? So let's say, for example, because His Excellency is kind of the base behind all of this, right? He's the money guy. And he's the guy that says, hey, we're going to make this fight happen because my bank book says so. But what if he's not allowed? What if the governing bodies are now pushing back and saying that Riyadh season is going to suffer from this if you try to do this? So he's got to play this really smart in itself. And then Zuffa Boxing kind of becomes a place where younger fighters can go to get ready to be on these Riyadh bigger cards. And in doing so, we'll also have some bigger names that you could possibly know or possibly remember, because the only people, like we've said, that they're going to be able to go after are going to be non-contracted fighters or fighters that have their contracts that are coming up, right, from a lot of these places. So I think that His Excellency might be in a little bit more of a weird position, and there's some jockeying going on still, I think, between the governing bodies, and that's why this hasn't been as big and as grandiose as we kind of expected it to be. What do you think?
That's a really good take. And first of all, I think that, yes, I agree that if he smacks him early on, big knockout, Callum Walsh is big. However, I think it'd be even better for Zuffa Boxing going forward with, well, it's about boxing, folks, if they have a really good, say, 8-round fight and it's close, but Walsh clearly looks a better fighter, and then he knocks him out, even better. A really close fight where people say, wow, is that the kind of action we're going to get? It was actually, it was pound for pound. It was ground and pound. It was really pushy. That would be great. As for your other point, I really agree, because sanctioning bodies, as I said last week, sanctioning bodies are working out for a battle here. Mm-hmm. And we have seen them getting more proactive. They've been supine in the past. In the recent past, they've been supine. Well, where are the sanctioning bodies in this? Now they're making their own decisions. Now, those decisions we might not like or we might question, like WBC saying, hey, have a free pass. Have a free pass. Alexander Usyk, have a free pass. But, and things like, I'm going to install you as number one, Conor Benn in the welterweight division, which you see, Eddie Hearns is saying we won't wait for you now, WBC. Why? Because WBC have said, I hear you, Sullivan Sissoko, let's talk. That's happened with those 3 mandatories. So it's happened with Nonito Donaire, allegedly. And who else? Who was the other one? It's happened with Nonito Donaire, and there's another one, isn't there? Yeah. Sullivan Sissoko. And there is another one as well. Shakram Giyasov. So it's happened with all of those. Plus, they are getting involved. And I don't know what's happened. You might have more information regarding Frank Sanchez and Richard Torres Jr. Can you get it together? Do we have to have purse bids? We'd rather not. They're becoming proactive. I really like this from the sanctioning bodies. We won't always like what they do, but they're basically saying, you think you can work without us? Well, actually, we are still here.
And then that leads into, so what do you do? What are they trying to do with Callum Walsh? Because currently he's a light middleweight, right? So, yeah. And if they're setting these fights up to have fighters fight on these Riyadh cards and these, whatever they're going to do there, he's a light middleweight. Champions in that division are Arislanda Lara. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot. Conor Benn, you could fight, Carlos Adames. Those are your champions. Ring doesn't have a junior or light middleweight champion right now. So all of this is kind of like, this is them grooming, Callum Walsh to kind of jump into that position.
Isn't he ideal for your Zuffa belt, though? that
Yes.
that piece of tin and nickel, as some people say, that is a new belt that, you know, isn't he ideal for your Zuffa belt? He's your first Zuffa champion, folks. But
Yeah.
as you say, you've got to have other people, because you can't have tin cans fighting him every week. You can't have a bum of the or every month. You can't have a bum of the month club where you say, here's the league, and you think, who's that? Never heard of him. You know, he's 5 and 26. You can't do that. So they need, in a way, they have done this and not done the work, it seems. Although they might have done, but it sounds like they haven't done the work. There's far more work to be done to make this seem legitimate.
Well, the only other fight that I think that they was possibly, and there hasn't been any confirmation on this, that they were talking about, was another fighter that they're promoting, Radzav Butayev, a Russian fighter, possibly fighting Sergey Boychuk, a Ukrainian fighter. Boychuk coming off of a loss, you know, but he's been in there with some big names. So if you can get fights like this, I think, you know, he was supposed to fight Madrimov. He's been in there with a number of guys. If you can get guys like this, I think that the hardest part for all of this is going to be putting enough glitz and enough sparkle on all of this to get people to watch. Just getting them to watch for the sake of, hey, but look what we did with the UFC. I don't think that that's enough right now. I don't think that getting people to watch just based on the venom against the governing bodies is enough to watch right now. So they're going to have to do something.
But just play devil's advocate and turn that around a bit. Are you saying, yes, Callum Walsh, yes, Ocampo, yes, Boachuk, yes, people that you don't quite know, if you're outside of boxing, if you're in boxing, you ain't got much to say about them. I ain't got much to say about them. So is that what they are really relying on? They don't come with a past. It's not Ryan Sodding Garcia, where you know that people in the boxing world are going to go, well, there's this and this and this and this. You know, it's not Gervonta Davis where you say, okay, there are these things. These are clean. These are clean fighters in that respect, rather than, you know, there's a load of baggage. So if they're clean enough, you can make stuff. It's a fresh page, isn't it?
It makes it tough, though, doesn't it? You know, because I mean, yes, you're absolutely right, and you need to have that. You can't make a sandwich with nothing but mayonnaise. You know what I'm saying? I mean, some people probably do, and they're weird, but you have to have other things on there. And sometimes those other things on that sandwich are what make the sandwich. You know what I'm saying? Like a ham sandwich isn't called a ham sandwich because of the freaking lettuce, right? It's because of the ham. So you got to be able to produce some good ham. Is Callum Walsh the ham in this situation? Or are we just Callum Walsh is the current one because they've already got him locked down, and we're kind of familiar with some of his fights because we've seen some of his fights over the last couple of years and his involvement with Dana. Is that the case because we haven't seen yet the big surprise? I still think that there's going to be a big surprise. I think that it's going to be Terrence Crawford this year. And I also think that now you opened up the door even more for, like we said, for a Tyson Fury. But now, like I said, let's say you want to get Tyson Fury. Let's say you want to get Tyson Fury to fight. Who's Tyson's promoter? Frank Warren. So is Tyson Fury only Frank Warren's? You know what I mean? Is that the only person that Frank Warren has to worry about? No. He has a ton of other high-profile fighters. So let's say he says, hey, Tyson, you got to go do, you know, I want you to do this, but the governing bodies are saying to Frank Warren, hey, Frank, if Tyson goes and does that, you don't get your other fighters in for this. And I think this is what we're seeing right now. Maybe. I don't know. I
agree. There's leverage there. But hang on a minute. May I just point out that Dana White said not working with promoters. Not working with promoters. At that point, I mean, I podcasted the hell out of that because I knew we would come to the time when he'd have to work with promoters. And also, I keep an eye out on Dana White and Zuffa Boxing using the phrase, Callum Walsh is the ham, because you've created that, and it wouldn't surprise me.
I think it's impossible for Dana not to work with other promoters. But I think what he meant by that was he's not going to work with promoters that he's not going to work with the big promoters that have the ability to fight back. He's going to work with promoters, you know what I mean, that have up and coming fighters that they're going to be able to be like, I'm in a meeting with Dana White. Gog, 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 gog. Let me hold that for you while I shove it in my mouth even further. You want all of my fighters? No problem. This is what you're going to get. And Dana knows that he can push these people around. He knows that he can get what he wants out of it.
Yes, and that is why people, you see, making that comment, and you're quite right. People like Frank Warren, and you were right to use that example, they have worked this the right way. Quiet, respectful, knowledgeable. I have the same thing with Ben Shalom, and I big him up because I think he's a different kind. I think he's a more Frank Warren type promoter. People like Oscar De La Hoya, who's creating an awful lot of trouble at the moment, particularly for, he's talking about Dana White. His 12 Days of Christmas had Dana White on there, and an actor who looked like Dana White with AI stuff. And Eddie Hearn, who is basically saying, come on, I'm agitational. You've got to work with me. That's the kind of, I suspect they're the kind of promoters, to follow your view, that Dana White and Zuffa don't want to work with, because they're going to create too much trouble underneath. They're going to start getting, they're going to start thinking this doesn't fit me properly. And I'm feeling a bit itchy with it. So I need to say something. That's the last thing Zuffa Boxing want.
Yeah, I think that's where they're going to. I'm excited about this first one because I'm excited to see how it actually plays out. I'm excited to see what kind of surprises, because none of us know. They you know what I mean? This could come across as, it could be, okay, we're going to let them sit back. We're going to let them slowly build this thing and see what they can come up with. But we've seen stuff like this before when we had, do we not remember the World Series of Boxing? Do we not remember the Super 8, right? Tournament, like World Series of Boxing. Speaking of which, the guy that they were talking about fighting Sergey Boachuk in this is Radzav Butayev, who was in the World Series of Boxing. So he's familiar with this quote league idea already out the gate. So there's going to be some people, and I'm sure that they sold it on them for this and said, hey, this is a way for you to get a spot on these bigger Riyadh cards, right? That our name is also going to be attached with, but we're just going to keep it back here in the Apex Center for now until we have big enough stuff. It's interesting to see.
Now that Contender Series and all of that, I know you loved that. I loved that. And we haven't had as much of that.
No.
So that's a really interesting way to do that. If they're saying, remember that, this is what that is,
sure,
then I think a load of people, including us, will be saying, yep, all in for that.
But I mean, we just had, they just had like a bunch of like the tournaments, IBF and IBAA and WBA and WBO. They just had a lot of those, and they were televised. DAZN was airing them and stuff like that. And I can tell you exactly how many people didn't watch, because we're the ones talking to you right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So other governing bodies have tried to do this. I think the difference really is going to be in the deal that they've made with Paramount Plus. Now, that is another interesting thing that we can get into very quickly, because just because you have Amazon doesn't mean you have Paramount Plus.
Nope.
And you have to buy that separately with your account. So is there going to be an influx of people buying this out the gate and just destroying their subscription afterwards? Or is there going to be an influx after the first one of people going, you know what? That looked really cool. I'm going to get this now.
it's really interesting because yes, we will know, and what we don't have from Netflix either is, after the Mike Tyson fight, which is the bigger of the two with Jake Paul, we don't know what the figures were of people cancelling their subscription, coming in, cancelling. We don't know what that was. So yes, it's we will know very quickly, I suppose, from social media, because my eyes weren't on that when with Netflix, but they will be with this, whether people say didn't like it, cancelling my subscription, or are they locked in for 12 months?
It's weird. What's the big fish out there right now that everybody's fighting over as far as that goes, right? It's Warner Brothers, right? That's the big news right now is Paramount going to get it or is Netflix going to get it? You want to know the fun? I mean, I think that maybe Zuffa and the UFC are banking on Paramount getting it. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter because if Netflix gets it, well, they've got to deal with the WWE, and that's also TKO. TKO is absolutely just slow key taking over everything inside of the combat sports and playing both sides at this point, I kind of think, to make sure that they've kind of hedged their bets and they're going to be safe no matter what. Right. And the Paramount thing is huge because if Paramount ends up winning this thing and they end up getting Warner out of all of this, that opens up the possibilities for any of those companies that they're in bed with right now, And Paramount is also a bigger one, I think, than Netflix in this instance for guys like this. So WWE already has all of their deals for all of their toys, all of their, merchandise stuff. UFC, Zuffa Boxing, all of these other companies, maybe not so much. So maybe there's the possibility of some of these things coming into play because Paramount, it's Paramount and Skydance. I think it is Paramount Skydance, which is, also amusement parks. That's also all of the other properties that come along with it. So 2026 is going to be very interesting on the other side of stuff that you get to see. I predict that there's going to be a new line of merchandise and action figures and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm here for it.
Yeah. And they'll want to break out star as well. They'll want to break out star who can then go into the TV streaming market.
And what better star than a milk toast Irish, just a beaut of a baby face. You know what I mean? It leads into it all over again. Steve, listen, I'd like to know what's going on over at World Weary Guy 1. I know I want to because we're going to cut this one off here because if we get into it, I've got another topic here and I want to talk about this one next week because it looks like next week we're going to talk about this White House show. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth on this White House show. And I don't think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to lead over into boxing. This White House MMA show isn't going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. And it's going to lead over into boxing. And it's going to be very weird what happens with combat sports. But we do have some good boxing fights coming up, boy. We've got some great, great fights coming up. So listen, not only is there boxing stuff, there's also music. There's videos. There's movies. There's everything over at World Weary Guy 1. What do you got going on this week, Steve?
Well, I've just watched Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who I have said in my podcast has the acting talent of an oak table.
Okay.
With Ryan Reynolds, wisecrackery, A plus wisecrackery, quackery. I've not seen this before. Red Notice, which came out in 2021. Reason why I podcasted about it is because they're apparently making 2 back-to-back sequels this year. I know it was incredibly popular on Netflix, and I despair of people because it's just terrible. It's got a MacGuffin of 3 Fabergé eggs on steroids. And you have to collect all 3 like Pokemon. You have to collect them all so that for no reason, I don't know why. And there's a scene where they both get sent to a jail. They're both American citizens, get sent to a jail, which is a tough Russian jail atop a cliff. And Ryan Reynolds has been there a while when Dwayne Johnson gets sent, and yet his hair is still perfect with that little sweep he's got at the top. There must be a barber's parlor or a tonsorial parlor in that tough Russian jail.
You
Do you know what? It's crap.
You know what, Steve? Don't play like you've never had your hair cut in jail. Everybody knows that there's a way to get your hair cut in jail because you never know. You never know when it's going to be date night, Steve, and you want to look your damnedest.
I had it cut because I was getting an appeal. That is why. I've told you this before. The appeal was denied, and rightly so. But I told you that, didn't I?
Well, in confidence, and yet here we are. I made the mistake, Steve, of watching a movie called Save Yourself over the weekend here because it was on my TV. It's about a couple that decide to get away from the city and get away from the muck and the mire that happens in New York City, and they decide they're going to cut themselves off and turn off their phones and get rid of their laptops and go work on each other's, their feelings and stuff. And they go to the woods, and in the woods, they find out that the world is being taken over by aliens. And these aliens come in the form of little furry tribbles that eat gasoline. That's right. The ethanol is what they're looking for to survive. Yes, absolutely. And the entire thing ends with them they find a baby along the way, and then they get surrounded by some glass orb that protects them and gives them energy and oxygen, and nothing can happen. And they all of a sudden have cell service inside of this thing, and this glass orb takes them up into space, and you roll credits. So I don't want to hear about your bullshit, rock movie with Ryan Reynolds or whatever, because when you just take a couple and a baby and put them inside of a glass box, like John Travolta's Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and take them off into space and then just roll credits, fade to black right there. No, I'm sorry. No.
Is this an actual movie, or were you high as a kite?
It can be two things, Steve. This is what we've established on this program, is it can be multiple things. Okay. Listen, there's one thing that is undoubtedly true, though. I don't know if you know this or not, Steve.
When it comes to the children, Wu-Tang is for the children. We teach the children.
I mean, I told you it could be multiple things, right?
Teach the children.
Teach the children to get in a glass bubble and don't watch yourself or Red Notice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Bees of Boxing. We don't know shit about movies, but we know a lot about boxing. And one thing that you got to remember when you're watching a movie, you don't have to do multiple things. You can just sit there pants on or pants off. But if you're boxing, you make sure that you do one thing and one thing only, ladies and gentlemen. And that's tuck your chin.
Wrestling, rock, pop, books, films, TV, boxing. All of this is covered on Steve Swift's Rambling Reviews. I am he, Steve Swift, a UK guy. What you get is all of that. And a funny voice, and even a funnier face. See? Steve Swift's Rambling Reviews. Come to me. I've got a review. Just for you. Ta-ta.